Okay, well, we are live here now from the University of Kansas. I want to welcome our virtual audience, both to the University of Kansas, the beautiful Spooner Hall, the Commons venue that we're in today for the Envisioning a World Beyond APCs, BPCs. I'm Ada Emmett. I'm the director of the Dave Schulenberger Office of Scholarly Communication and Copyright. I, along with my co-planners, Rebecca Kinnison and Bob Kieft from KN Consultants, are thrilled to have a wonderful array of speakers and experts from around the world and from different disciplinary groups and stakeholder groups. We have a global audience with us today. I want to encourage the viewers of this live broadcast to go to the list of panelists where you will have a full description, job title, beautiful pictures of the lovely bouquet of people we have here and their background and experience working in this field of open access and publishing. Please, live audience as well as those in the room, feel free to tweet out a greeting from where you are coming from, your institution, and what part of the world. We're very excited to have, again, a live audience with us. The tweet is pound KUOA SYMP, SYMP 16. Let's see. Please do tweet out your questions. So what's going to happen is we will have our live, our panelists here give quick 2-minute talks, and we would like our live audience to tweet questions, comments, what have we missed, and we will have a record of that, whether or not during this 2-hour period we'll be able to address those, but we will be attempting to address questions directly to the panelists and respondents that are in the room. Also, we have a Google Doc that's open for public comment for you to put your comments, questions, thoughts, and we welcome you to use that. That's also linked from the page where you are now seeing us at the top. Please note also that there is closed captioning for those who like to use that lower down on the page. I'd now like to introduce to you the Dean of KU Libraries here at the University of Kansas, Kevin Smith, who will moderate the live stream session. He'll explain the goals of the session and the rest of the 2 hours. So, Kevin?
Thank you, Ada. Good morning. At least it's morning here in Lawrence, Kansas. We're delighted that you are joining us. Welcome to this 2-hour live broadcast of a symposium on open access publishing entitled Envisioning a World Beyond APCs. As Ada said, I'm Kevin Smith. I'm the Dean of Libraries here at the University of Kansas, and I will be moderating this event that is taking place here on the KU campus. We are delighted to have folks from around the world joining us through the live broadcast. I hope you are listening and that you will participate using the Google Doc and the Twitter hashtag. The purpose of this day-and-a-half symposium is to consider the models that are available for achieving an expansive, inclusive, and balanced global ecosystem for open publishing. We have been privileged to assemble an international group of highly respected individuals from academia, publishing, librarians, and NGOs to engage in a dialogue around one of the most fundamental questions for the open access movement. To what extent can a global academic community create an open access publishing system that is without cost to authors or readers? If this is possible, how? If it's not possible, what are the barriers? This live stream broadcast, which opens our symposium, asks each of our 18 panelists to provide a brief, as Ada said, 2 minutes only, we're going to police that, a brief explanation of what they, from their own particular experiences or perspective, still need to know to answer this question. As part of this lightning round talk, we have asked each panelist to address some sub-questions. Given your focus or project, what do you not know about open access publishing that would help us to create the future we envision? What do our scholarly publishing communities still need to know or to do in order to develop this expansive, open, and balanced ecosystem for worldwide open access? After each panelist has spoken, we will take a short 2-minute, we hope 2-minute break to allow for our cameras to be readjusted in order to broadcast the second hour of discussion. I will come back to the front to help moderate. We also have a distinguished group of respondents here at KU, and we will ask them to make comments on what they have heard. This is also the chance for those of you who are watching the live stream to participate by sending your comments or questions to our Twitter hashtag or by using the Google Doc that is provided. The hashtag and a link to the Google Doc should be on the web page you're looking at right now. Our panelists, our panelists, respondents, and I hope our virtual participants will talk and think together as part of a collaborative, problem-solving endeavor that helps us to envision an open future for publishing that is accessible and just for all authors and readers. With that, I will invite our first speaker to the podium. Each speaker will introduce themselves. Juan?
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I think I'm Juan Alperin from Simon Fraser University and from the Public Knowledge Project. I think we all agree here that we would like a world in which all of the content that's published in academic journals is published in a way that is accessible to everyone. And a world in which there are barriers to access to knowledge is problematic. But a world that provides that access through article processing charges does so by changing the problem of exclusion from a problem of access to access to read to a problem of access to write. In particular for parts of the world that have less resources available to them, and from institutions and from people working from fields in which there aren't abundant resources to pay article processing charges. And so that world in which we lose the access to be able to contribute and participate in scholarship is in some ways even more problematic than the world in which we might be able to gain that access through some other means, through green open access or through accessing through friends and family and through other ways that people from developing countries have managed to gain access to the work. A world in which they can't participate to write is even worse than a world in which they can't access to read. And so surely people say that waivers can solve this problem. But I'd like to say that Latin America definitely does not need the charity. Latin America, in fact, is already providing more to the world. 30 seconds. Is already providing more to the world through its, by making all of its content that they publish freely available to the rest of the world. And so this is the worst deal ever, in the words of your president-elect. This is it's a deal in which South America loses bigly. Okay? And so we need to take back ownership of our publications. I think that the world in which how we solve this problem is by having scholarly publishing come back to being scholar-led and scholar-owned. I think we can take some lessons from the platform cooperativism movement in which those benefits that the online platforms give us come back to the community of stakeholders. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Ivy Anderson from the California Digital Library. Well, first of all, I know the topic of our symposium is also intended to cover books as well as journals, but I will speak about journals and probably also about APCs, which is something that I have been studying a little bit more of late. So I'd like to start with a few things that we do know. We know that authors at our institutions, and by that I mean primarily Western, North American, and European institutions, when I say our, recognizing the culture that I do come from, are largely publishing in mainstream journals that journals that dominate Western publishing, and they have not abandoned those journals in large numbers. and that open access ranks quite low in author priorities. In fact, as Carol Tenopir has put it in the University of California Pay It Forward study, reputation building within a discipline is by far the most important priority for academic authors. And so as a result of that, we know that despite a long period of advocacy, Gold OA, or as I like to call it, Direct OA, is still quite slow in terms of uptake and needs quite a bit of encouragement. So I think the two big gap questions for those of us who want to take back academic journal publishing or to reconstruct journal publishing in a radical new way are, if we build it, will they come? And, or put differently, what are the conditions that we need to put in place to enable and encourage our scholars to make this transition? And I have much more to say, but I guess I will stop there because I'm close to the end of time. I do want to say that with respect to other stakeholders such as societies, we often talk about publishers in a very monolithic way, and I think there's much more that we could do to engage with societies about what it would take for societies to transition their journals. I think transitioning journals is one of the issues that we have to confront, not just creating new journals, but transitioning the existing publishing environment.
Good morning, Ariana Becerril from Redalic. Thank you very much for the invitation to be with you today. I'm speaking here on behalf of many stakeholders in open access in the Latin American region, like researchers, journal editors, and open access initiatives, to let you know our concerns about what I call the next generation of restrictions. Let me start by highlighting some key facts of the open access model in Latin America. First of all, science produced and published in Latin America has been always open access. Open access has been the natural way in which our scientific communication system works. Second, journals have been supported by universities and research institutions. The majority of them, about 90% of the total number, including the most prestigious journals, are published by public universities. I meant government-funded. The third one, historically, we have suffered from not having access to science published in the global north due to our lack of economic resources. And the last, the tradition of scholarly publishing has not been outsourced to commercial publishers, nor supported by charging authors ever. So I would really like to understand how could the North had let some companies grow in such a way universities can control the scholarly publishing enterprise. I wonder if there is any publishing tradition inside universities of the global north that could have been lost. In that case, could it be recovered? So if we really want to talk about commons, we cannot just change the restrictions from reading to publishing. We cannot just focus our discussions on how companies of the north will continue being profitable. The APC model brings a risk of widening the gap among researchers of different regions in a global scientific conversation, as well as the risk of breaking the open nature of the scientific communication system in Latin America.
Hello, I'm Martin Eve. I'm a professor of English at the University of London, and I'm the CEO of the Open Library of Humanities, which is a collectively funded open access journal publisher with no open access APC charges. I've been asked to say what I don't know, and quite frankly, it could fill a library, but we've only got a couple of minutes. So I had a set of key questions that I wanted to put out there. First of those was that in removing APCs, how do we make sure that we keep the visibility of labour? There are things we want doing from publishers: typesetting, copy editing, proofreading, digital preservation, platform maintenance, etc. If you're not paying for something directly as an author in a service model, how do we make sure that that labour is still valued and get those things that are important? Where have APCs come from? Is another thing I don't quite know. It's to do with transition from sales to service models, but we're subsuming fixed and sunk costs into marginal and unit costs and assuming that that is the best way to proceed in recovering revenue streams. I also want to know, do non-classical models have scalability limits? We've seen a lot of collaboratively funded enterprises, and they work very well, but they're not classically framed, so you don't pay so that someone else can't have access. And how are those doing well out of APCs at the moment going to respond to what we're doing? Are we going to see aggression from big publishers who are actually managing to supplement their revenue streams in the present moment? And lastly, I want to know, how do non-APC models work within market structures and government imperatives to create market structures? Is there things we need to do to harmonise the models that we're creating with those structures? And how do radical political changes at this current moment affect the types of enterprise that we're trying to create for a better world of scholarly communications? Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Fitzpatrick with Modern Language Association. And I want to put aside the notion of open access publishing per se for a moment and instead focus on the underlying goal of that phrase. Getting the knowledge that's produced by those in and around our colleges and universities into the broadest possible circulation where it can do the most good for society as a whole. Because, oh my goodness, does society as a whole need that knowledge right now? Lots of that work does circulate openly today, but not in coordinated, discoverable, sustainable, or even entirely legal ways. So the question that we've been working on is whether we can build a scholarly society-managed, researcher-governed, not-for-profit, interdisciplinary platform for facilitating communication amongst researchers and between researchers and the world, a platform that might provide an alternative to VC-funded for-profit platforms that have gotten a lot of use lately. Our test bed for exploring this question is Humanities Commons, a federated network of scholarly society sites that are linked by a common identity management system and connected to a shared repository. Humanities Commons will be open very soon, permitting anyone interested to create an account, to develop a professional profile, to deposit and share work, to participate in group discussions, and to create new publications. But there's a lot left to be done and to be figured out. I mean, we have to figure out, as has been said earlier, how to get and keep everyone, not just the open access aware tech-savvy crowd, but scholars of very traditional types as well, involved in using this platform. I mean, we have to get institutions to recognize that this is where important work is being done, and we have to get organizations, scholarly societies, libraries, foundations, and others to be willing to support and sustain the platform on scholars' behalf. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Jean-Claude Guédon. I come from Montreal, University of Montreal. My first point is that we have to know how to shape open access. Open access is fundamentally about communication among scientists, among scholars. It is not publishing. It is not a financial problem. It's a communication problem. Humanity deals with reality by having organized a very lovely system of distributed intelligence based on communication. The priorities, therefore, are simple. Fit everything else into that imperative of communication and not the reverse. We must think of the communication first. So in particular, let's not immediately start by saying, how do we make this durable, or as people prefer to say nowadays, sustainable? It's not a question of money that's first, especially if you want to pay for something you don't know what you're paying for. You've got to know first what open access is about. It's communication. The problem of the open access system right now is simply based on the fact that the whole communication system is fitted into an evaluation system, which itself is perverse. It's based on journals. We don't evaluate the work of people, we evaluate where they place their work, which is absurd. So what we have to do is really establish a system of communication which is completely autonomous from the imperatives of journals, from the imperatives of the financing system. And I'll just finish with one thing. Sustainability is often asked of the communication system of scholars. Scientific research has never been sustainable. It's been subsidized for the last 4 centuries. So why shouldn't communication among scientists not be subsidized as well?
Good morning. I'm Lorraine Harrycombe, University of Texas at Austin. And I'm going to come to you with a voice from the global south, my home country, South Africa, where I would like to use the backdrop of student protests there to decolonize and transform higher education institutions in South Africa as a powerful opportunity to reframe open access publishing as a strategy for social responsiveness that goes well beyond the African continent. Decolonization and transformation in higher education are key strategies and issues on the agenda of higher education in South Africa, and form the foundation of open access policies, practices, and mandates there. Here are some of the issues, just to be clear about what I mean when I talk about decolonization. The curricula are still dominated by dominating worldviews, e.g. Western, male, capitalist, heterosexual, etc., and the content underrepresents and undervalues perspective and experiences of those who do not fit into the mainstream categories. The second issue, changing demographics in the higher education. Like here in South Africa, there's been a massive expansion of higher education across race and class over the last 2 decades, and many of those students do not fit the profile of the mainstream 18-year-old, middle-class, white, university-ready high school graduate. This is happening in the US too. The fundamental question is, what is the fitness of the current degree? Relevance to the real world for the Global South is another issue. What we know is that open access removes one barrier from the end user to enable access to open content. What we also know is that APCs is hardly affordable to African researchers and therefore limit their access. Librarians and libraries have been at the forefront of advancing the open movement for a while now, and some of the libraries in South Africa have taken on that role of publisher to help and to support decolonization of African scholarly literature. They've combined green and gold open access to provide academic institutions with the capacity to probe opportunities to decolonize the material. I'll stop there.
Hi there, I'm Neil Jacobs, and I'm speaking today in a personal capacity. So we were asked a few things that we would find it helpful to know, and I have several of those. Firstly, we're basically concerned to establish or perhaps re-establish academic control over the means of scholarly production. Do we agree, therefore, that learned societies are one way to operate that academic control? They often do great public engagement work, which is part of what we're interested in out of journal subscriptions and APC funds. So do we think that's an issue? I'd like to ask, what does the future of publishing look like? I'd like to join up a conversation about beyond the APC with a conversation about beyond the PDF, and so that we can take a step forward in both ways. I'd like to ask what open access publishing models work outside of the global north. I don't know that myself, but people here do. What makes them work and what might break them? And I'd like to ask, in one possible future, in some disciplines and in some geographies, we see researchers and institutes and libraries and funders taking a rather active role in open access publishing. So what incentives would be needed to reward that sort of work? And what other barriers prevent the academic research and information communities from working together to provide collective publishing services at scale? Thank you.
I'm Heather Joseph, the Executive Director of SPARC in Washington, D.C. And most, if not all of us in this room, consider ourselves to be part of the open access movement. And this truly has been, from the start, a social justice movement, a group of loosely organized individuals and organizations who have a well-articulated, shared concern for changing a specific aspect of the status quo. As a movement, we've been working to correct imbalances in the fundamental global system of how we share knowledge and to promote open and equitable access to information in order to serve the public good. As this movement has grown and progressed, it feels to me that it's become ever more critically important that we be able to individually and collectively answer the question, what does success mean to us as a movement? So often, we find ourselves focusing on our own specific individual aspect or interest of advancing open access, which is great, that's fine. But I also think that now more than ever, we need to find ways to be more deliberate about picking our heads up and making sure that we're truly paying attention to how the work we're doing individually affects us collectively as a movement. This is particularly critical as we consider making decisions that have profound implications for either replacing or reinforcing economic inequities in our global community. And so this is a gap that I'd like us to think about filling as we work through the next day and a half of conversations together. What actions can we take to truly ensure that our individual efforts are mutually reinforcing our collective progress towards our shared goal of an open and equitable system of sharing knowledge, and one that truly does have the public good at heart?
I'm Rebecca Kennison. As I was thinking about what I would say in my 2 minutes, I was playing with several ideas. What infrastructure would we need to have that's not currently in place? Is there a mixed method for achieving the goal of an expansive, inclusive, balanced, worldwide open publishing ecosystem? And if there is, who potentially loses out? How do universities and colleges need to change, including shifting tenure and promotion criteria? And what new responsibilities should they take on? These are all important questions that I hope we'll begin to address during the rest of the symposium. I'd settled on that last one, though, and jotted down some ideas when I then stopped into the uniquely KU shop at the Oriad Hotel. The clerk, an undergrad at KU, asked what brought me to Lawrence, and I explained I was here to talk about open access. I was all ready to explain what that meant, but his eyes lit up and he replied with gusto, "That's awesome! We need to tear this whole system down and rebuild it from scratch." Nothing I was going to say in those few minutes was going to be anything nearly as radical as that. But inspired by that, that's now what I'm saying. What do we not know about OA publishing that we should? Just this. Is the current system so broken that we need to do what that young clerk suggested? Do we need to start over? Let's imagine that we could do that. If we were to build a scholarly communication system from scratch, what elements would we keep and what would we discard? I looked at the questions with which I started with this new lens. I realized that thinking about the system, not in terms of co-opting, as I had been, but in terms of starting anew, as impossible as that might be in practice, allowed me, and I hope us, the participants here and the participants globally, to think about my questions quite differently. Building infrastructure, adopting mixed methods of paying for publishing, changing P&T criteria. All of these look quite different when you no longer think about co-opting the system, but rather about tearing this whole system down, rebuilding it from scratch. But that's the work we need to do, because let's face it, if we don't, that young clerk and his friends and his colleagues will.
I'm Mary Rose Musey from Temple University Press and Temple University Libraries, and I'm going to talk about long-form scholarship, where the questions are legion. So when you talk about open access for long-form scholarship, what do you mean? I think this is the first question. The word monograph is used most frequently, but what's a monograph? I asked the press acquisitions editors and the director of marketing for their definition of monograph, and I got 4 different answers. If we can't define it within our own press, how can we universally define it when it comes to open access? There are slight differences in the definition of monograph or how the term is used in the Crosswick report for HEFC, the Ithaca report, the OAPEN UK report, and across publishers in general. It usually does not mean course books, but presses like Lever and Athabasca include some course books in what they call monographs. Luminos seems to as well. The AAU-ARL University subvention idea was looking at first books, which are tenure books. Why does it matter? Here's what we at Temple, this is what our output was for the past 4 seasons. 7% monographs, 79% course adoption books, which are upper level undergrad and grad courses, 14% trade. Given that, what issues do we want to address with open access when it comes to long-form scholarship? Books in particular, revised dissertations or tenure books reflect years of investment and research. And what's happening in terms of tenure and promotion? Juan's project, where he's gathering tenure and promotion policies, are essential. What costs should be covered? The Ithaca survey on cost breakdown showed the average basic costs range between $20,500 and $34,700, and the highest cost is acquisitions and development by far. And how much do we need to make an impact? The Mellon-funded digital monograph P&L Builder, used to gather staff time, has 15-plus page user guide. There are numerous questions here.
Williams Mwagu, from Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa, based in Dakar, Senegal. A world without APC, BPC is a world where knowledge for human problem solving, not exotic research, not article necessarily matters. Where color of skin, race, and language of authors, venue of publication, quality of journals, etc. do not matter in the quality of knowledge produced. Those who produce knowledge define, control access, and manage the knowledge they produce. Knowledge ranking is localized to bring out the best in every community. Where public knowledge is public, electronic highway is not clogged by fake, dodgy journals as a result of APC. Free and multi-directional flow of knowledge. What is possible? No supreme roles to the commercial publishers. Ask Latin America. Turn the funnel. Publishers should be clients of research-producing institutions and not vice versa. They should not own or exercise any form of authority over research publications. Knowledge should be produced, processed, and circulated from the locality where they are produced. Barriers. Publishing abroad, dominant in Africa for visibility, is not a global science communication policy. It is therefore hegemonic and weakens the quality of science at home and volume of knowledge produced universally. Knowledge produced in and about Africa is therefore absent in Africa. APC creates new enclosures and trajectories. APC is a type of impact factor, imposing cost and related ranking by base quality criteria, exercises stress on the economy of African scholars. African economies are incapable of paying APC. What is needed to go forward? Institutions should undertake the task of organizing and publishing research. Scholarly publications should be organized, indexed, and ranked locally. Finally, what are the next steps? We should come out from this meeting with a Kansas declaration on APC. And there should be projects, studies that are commissioned to examine how publication function can sit in the universities and identify appropriate roles for publishers according to the levels of development of different communities. Thank you.
I know there's a height differential, I apologize. Okay. So my name is Charlotte Rowe, and I am the Scholarly Communications Librarian at the University of San Francisco, where I work at the intersection of scholarly communication and social justice, and I'm working to integrate both into the everyday practice of librarians. A concern about what I don't know actually extends to what I think the academic publishing community needs to know, which is where biases and injustices exist in the historical publishing structure that we are replicating in these amazing new open access systems that we are creating. We talk a lot about inequalities of economics and access, which are of course, very important, and there are people at this meeting who know firsthand how the economic demands of publishing are impacting scholarship, and I look forward to learning more from them. But I am seeking to know, and I think we should all be asking this question, is how did these publishing structures come about in the first place? Who were they built to privilege? For example, there are countless studies showing gender imbalances in published authors, even if fields demonstrate equity in demographics. And according to a recent study by Al Greco, 90% of academic publishing professionals are white. So are we in Western academia and Western publishing prepared to acknowledge that our globalism was and is colonialism and give up structures that privilege us? I think this is particularly relevant after the results of the last US election. We like to say in the words of Theodore Parker that the arc of the moral universe is long and it bends toward justice. But as we can see today, particularly after the events of the last week, there are people in the world who are committed to injustice rather than justice, racism rather than equality, to building walls rather than sharing commons. And even more tragically, we are all willing to accept these inequalities to make things work. I was just challenged this week, in fact, by rhetoric professor Nicole Gonzalez-Howell, who told me that in her circles, the kind of language that I enforced as an editor in my previous career is a prestige dialect and power code called standard edited academic English. This is my privilege and my bias that I value a kind of writing that doesn't necessarily signify quality of content. It's a hard thing for me to acknowledge, but now I need to learn more about it in order to let it go. So I ask, what privileges do we have that we need to critically examine so that we can dismantle them in order to move towards equality and open access?
Hi, I'm Mike Roy from Middlebury College, and I'm here to talk about a project I've been working on called The Lever Press. The Lever Press is a library-funded digital-first open access monograph press that grew out of the Oberlin Group of Libraries, sustained currently by 50 libraries from liberal arts colleges. We have about $1.5 million in funding that will support our work through 2020, and we'll produce about 60 titles during this 5-year period. As we embark upon this adventure, I have 5 big questions that I grapple with as we envision a way for our effort to contribute to a broader change in the ecosystem of scholarly communication, and I suspect that those questions obtain to many of the other projects that we're talking about in the room. First is a membership model, and so the question I worry about is, can we sustain a membership model in the face of ongoing pressure on library collections budgets? In other words, what is the value proposition and the price point for our model to be sustainable in the long run? Second has to do with lowering costs. So our per cost title is about $17,000, which includes acquisitions, peer review, production, distribution. While we enjoy the savings of not having to construct a paywall or to handle sales, are there ways that we can lower costs even further to allow our dollars to go further? The third question has to do with blurring boundaries. How innovative can we be in our digital publications? How can we create a more integrated scholarly communication infrastructure that will provide the expressive power to our authors, be accessible for the long haul using appropriate preservation strategies, and legible to scholarly communities? I'm going to skip the fourth question, go right to the fifth, which has to do with the tipping point. If we envision a world where everything is open and there are no longer any costs associated with accessing scholarly journals and monographs, how long can we afford to sustain these two parallel universes? When will we reach a tipping point where we feel confident that the change is underway and open access has won? The way we fund and run our libraries will be very, very different in this new world, and will require a great deal of retooling in terms of budgeting, staffing, technology, and workflows. And when will we be able to actually reinvent ourselves?
My name is Ralf Schimmer, Max Planck Digital Library. It's a pleasure to be here, in particular as this symposium draws its inspiration from the Berlin 12 conference and the OA 2020 initiative as it is put forward by the Max Planck Society. In my capacity as project manager for OA 2020, it is perhaps not a surprise when I say that we would not be afraid of APCs. In fact, from our perspective, it's a bit hard to see how APCs could be fully avoided in an emerging new publishing ecosystem. But on the other hand, we can of course also heartily embrace the notion of moving beyond APCs, because we see APCs not as the final or only solution to the challenges that lie ahead of us in organizing the cash flow that is needed to finance the publishing services. In any case, what is needed from our perspective is a leverage to bring about open access on a large scale, much more than we have seen so far. We need more dynamics in the system, and in particular to be able to liberate the budgets as they are currently locked in the subscription system, so that they can be used for financing open access publishing services. In responding to the two questions, I would say currently all analytics and discourse is on the subscription side. We need to know more about what is happening on the subscription, on the submission and publishing side. Libraries have to build the capacities to know more what their patrons do and where they publish. And with the second question, I was reminded of a famous saying in architecture: form follows function. I believe we need in scholarly communication to develop us into a system where the money can follow the publishing services as they are requested by the academic communities. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kathleen Shearer. I'm the Executive Director of CORE. We're an international association with members from around the world. For the last decade and a half, we have been working to achieve open access, and I think we have been successful. And kudos to all the people here and many others that have worked so hard. But with this singular focus on open access, as Juan Pablo and others have said, we're at risk of exacerbating an already serious problem of participation through a reliance on APCs. So we need to think beyond open access. We need to think about equality. At CORE, we're proposing to reposition the institution, the research center, and the library as a foundation of a new scholarly communication system. In this model, the institution takes responsibility for collecting, managing, and providing access to the content created by its community. We then connect those institutions through globally through common standards, and build value-added services on top, such as peer review. We already have a large, robust network of local journals and repositories on which we can start building this system. In this way, we will have a sustainable global system that also supports the needs and priorities of local communities, which is absolutely critical, and addresses both the access and the participation problems we have. So to accomplish this, I think we need to do a few things. We need to coalesce around a common vision. We need to ensure that our journals and our repositories are interoperable. And also, we need to change the way we assess quality and impact. We have to reduce our reliance on impact factor. It's a flawed measure. And finally, I think critically, we need to think beyond the journal article and recognize the value of a whole range of valuable materials and products that are produced through research. Thank you.
Hi, friends. I'm David Schulenberger. I'm a senior fellow at APLU and provost emeritus at the University of Kansas. I want to talk about the incentives to engage in scholarly communication. First, 4 principles. First, a scholar's motivation to publish is derived from the desire to contribute to better understanding of some topic. Second, scholarly work is accepted for publication because it contributes to better understanding of the subject and phenomena it addresses. Third, the beneficiary of the work is the community of students and scholars and ultimately the entire society. Else the work is not scholarly communication, should not be published. Fourth, the incidence of cost of publishing scholarship ought to be on those who benefit from it. Asking the scholar to contribute to the cost of publishing scholarship places the incidence of its cost on the author, not the beneficiary. Let me give you an analogy from my paper, Scholarly Communications is Not Toxic Waste. Producers of toxic waste generate it because the production process for some valued good produces it as a byproduct. The toxic waste byproduct must be disposed of properly. A just society requires the producer to bear the disposal costs. Placing the incidence of the cost of disposing of toxic waste on the producer encourages the producer to minimize toxic waste production. Do we want to encourage scholars to generate as little published scholarly work as possible? Just place the burden of the cost of disposing of it, the cost of publishing, on authors, and minimization will be the direction of the incentives. APCs place the burden on authors. An effective system of publishing scholarly work will place the cost of publication where the benefit is gained at the societal level.
Hello, I'm John Walensky. I work with the Public Knowledge Project, and I teach at Stanford University. And I just want to slow things down for one moment. I am the final speaker, I can say to everyone's relief. And what I want to address is not what we need to know, but what we do know. This is year 20, year 15 of open access. We have been at this for a long, long time. And in light of that, I think we can build on what we know and what we have. I would draw from Ralph Schimmer's work in terms of the money question. We have enough money to make all that we publish in all of the world open access. We need a means and a will for sure, but we have enough money. I would build on Michael's point in terms of cooperation. The number of colleges that are coming together to work together, whether to publish journals, whether to enter into a publishing press relationship, whether to share materials, all of those things are crucial to a way forward. How we proceed is by experiment and trial and pilot. We at the Public Knowledge Project are doing that. We're working on a cooperative model that says if there is enough money, what we need to do is reallocate that money.
that libraries need to reallocate subscription money to open access, and journals need to say, we need that money, but we will take it on the same terms as the subscription, only we will make our journals open access. In that simple, straightforward way, it might seem we have a scalability problem, but I want to point out one lesson that we have learned at the Public Knowledge Project. We started a little experiment about 18 years ago in terms of building some software, open source software to use for publishing. And October 1st, we hit 10,000 journals using open journal systems. 10,000 journals that have taken up what for us was something like a thought experiment and have said, we need an alternative and we're going to use it. Thank you very much.
So as John just told you, he was the last of our 18 panelists. I'm incredibly grateful to all of you for the wisdom, the provocation of your remarks, and for the discipline. You actually did all stick to 2 minutes, pretty close. So thank you very much. Should we thank them? I know our global audience would join if they could. As I told you at the beginning, we are going to take a brief break to rearrange our room to make it more easy to have and to broadcast a discussion. I think we've been given a tremendous amount of material to discuss. So if you will bear with us, we're going to do some rearranging, 2 to 5 minutes, and we will be back here to have a discussion. So the global audience, thank you for joining us. I've seen some of your tweets. Thank you for participating. We look forward to all of you taking part in a very robust discussion.